Think Different Nation is brought to you by InvestOut.net, where we connect homeowners who know that their homes could sell for more if renovated, with investors who are interested in adding that value at no cost to you. Once the home's renovated, you, as the homeowner, sell the home, and the investors make their profit from the increased value of the sale.
Learn more at InvestOut.net.
I'm sorry, but your analogy is a very bad one. If you want to make a comparison to something, compare it to something that makes sense. Compare it to math or music or art, because otherwise it belittles him and it and me.
No, I don't mean to belittle you at all.
Oh, but you are. Even in the way you're looking at me.
Mr. Waiskin, I think perhaps...
You want to know how good he is? I'll tell you how good he is. He is better at this than I have ever been at anything in my life. He is better at this than you'll ever be at anything. My son has a gift. He has a gift, and once you acknowledge that, then maybe we'll have something to talk about.
You're listening to the Think Differently podcast by innovator Ty Glover.
Imagine doing something for such a long period of time that the act itself, the steps you follow, and even the ideas you consider while doing it, become hard-coded in your DNA, where every move that you make becomes part of who you are. And as you consider obstacles in front of you for that day, that week, that month, the years to follow, all of those considerations and actions build upon each other, making you that much better and more masterful over time. Now imagine that these learned experiences, these proclivities, these abilities to process the things you learn, are transferred down to your sons, and then to their sons, and so on for 4 to 5 generations, because you all worked in the same trade. That's somewhere in the area of 4 to 5 generations of father and son bricklayers, masons, carpenters, working and refining their skills. Sons having children and watching their sons grow to learn the trade so they can be best positioned for the best jobs of their potential. Does that sound crazy that these things can possibly be transferred down through a bloodline from one generation to the next without having to look at the expanse of time to see that transition? Well, there's clear evidence to support a belief that trauma can be transferred down through the generations in various and oftentimes undetectable ways, as captured in a March 26, 2019 BBC article entitled, "Can the Legacy of Trauma Be Passed Down the Generations?" In this article, the researchers investigated how events in someone's lifetime can change the way their DNA is expressed, and how that change can be passed on to the next generation and to subsequent generations. But if this transition of experiences can be applied to scenarios involving trauma, then why would it not also be applicable to scenarios involving the monotony of life's repeating experiences of the mind, body, and soul, which all culminated in this instance in the creation of one of the greatest wonders of the world, Notre Dame? Scientists have long believed that the sexes are different, with women having larger prefrontal cortexes, which is believed to be why they retain memory so well. It's also believed that the female species, in performing the task of gatherer over the millions of years, gained special advantages from a visual processing standpoint, with women ultimately being more adept at processing near information, the gathering part, while men being more well-adapted for far distance information processing, calculating distance, and the other variables necessary to identify and assess the prey ahead of them, and the strategies for the hunt. We've all experienced shopping with someone from the opposite sex, where women typically don't have a pre-planned path, while men, they typically know exactly what they want. They're in it for the hunt, taking the most direct route to that target. Based on our evolutionary journey, somewhere in the area of 400 to 800,000 years ago, as fire began to be used more widely, our roles must have also changed, with the female species, the woman, the childbearer, assuming more of the role of the gatherer, while the male species, again, moved towards that hunt. The gatherer role involved the selection of what was ripe, not poisonous, the most tasteful and the most nutritional, while the men, again, we just focused in on the hunt, the known entity. While these were once hardwired actions on our part, they were instinctive behaviors. These now became tendencies, and they remain soft-wired in us now. That's why we still follow those inclinations today in many instances. Putting all that aside, let's now advance forward some 800 years to 2020. And let me introduce you to Romanieo Golphin Jr., a 10-year-old example of one's true ability to be able to tap into their instinctive advantage. What is instinctive advantage? It's those tendencies, the inclination and proclivities that are imprinted in our DNA, and from which I believe our greatest abilities can emerge. And as you'll hear, Romanieo has truly been able to discover his. What? You've never heard of Romanieo Golphin? Oh, you will. In fact, I've coined the phrase RG, or rather Romanieo Golphin, equals AE squared, or rather Albert Einstein squared, because Romania's intelligence, combined with his broad range of experiences, the connective strengths of the greats who have come before him, and the most advanced technology to have ever existed, that it's easy to see how Romanieo and others like him will definitely outpace Einstein's discoveries by at least a factor of 2. If you think about it, in terms of discovery, we are millions of times more advanced than the information that was available to Galileo, say, for example, back in the 1500s. But even today, we know as much information about our solar system as a cup of water taken from the combined oceans of the Earth. This means that there's incredible room for what many would call low-hanging fruit, and tremendous discoveries which lead to leapfrog effects for humanity as a whole. Romanieo is the product of 2 accomplished parents, a mother who's a PhD psychologist and a father who's a multilingual musician, plus. Now I use the word plus because this father, he's not just any multilingual musician, but rather someone who can speak and break down concepts and ideas into their smallest form so that they can become digestible to his son. And if you've ever heard that sarcastic comment or expression of, "Talk to me like I'm a 7-year-old," or whatever age you want to apply, because I just don't understand what you're saying. Well, his father, Romanieo Golphin Sr., he would break it down to his son as if his son was 1.5 years old, because that's the age he was when he began to teach him the elements of the periodic table, down to the number of protons, electrons, and neutrons. And his father, as he describes it, he would simply explain the concepts just like he would have explained a car motor and its parts in very simple terms. And in doing so, his son was able to take those parts in his head and assemble them into a motor, or in this case, physics, and an advanced understanding of how the universe works. Did I mention to you he's only 10 years old? So next question is, how did all of this happen? To understand this, I really think you have to go back to those generational stonemasons and carpenters and bricklayers who built Notre Dame back in the 1100s. And think about their inherited tendencies and where the lessons of their fathers were visited on the sons. I believe that each successive generation of stonemason inherited traits and tendencies from their parents, experiences, and these tendencies were building blocks towards brilliance just needing to be stacked. And I believe that Romania's DNA was hard-coded with the tendencies towards critical and analytical thinking, problem-solving, quantitative reasoning, which were obvious parts of his parents' gifts as well. These were just a few of the ingredients necessary for Romanieo to develop his instinctive advantage. The last thing necessary to complete this brilliance, the true key to the emergence of that brilliance, experiences. Romania's parents, Carl and Romanieo Sr., they made it so their son would experience the world of physics and not just learn it or study it. And that's how I believe Romanieo Jr. displays his instinctive advantage, through physics, at least in this one instance. Now his father's more modest about Romania's potential, suggesting that he started out just like any other child, and his abilities come primarily through the experiences of being homeschooled since birth. You see, to tell you a little bit more about Romanieo, he is a very normal 10-year-old with an amazing smile, captivating charm, and that's when he's actually citing Einstein's formulas. And at his birth, his parents made the conscious decision to homeschool him by finding what he liked and exposing him to it right down to the parts of the car. For example, iFly. iFly is a place which is akin to letting him experience skydiving without danger. iFly, the best way to describe iFly, I'd say it's an entertainment company where people can go and they pay a fee and they stand in a large glass cylinder type structure and they basically experience weightlessness. And the wind comes up from underneath them and they rise into the sky and they experience gliding like an eagle. I mean, if you've never done it before, it's truly a remarkable experience. And most of us will be blown away by it. No pun intended. And for Romanieo, his first response as well was, wow, when you go in there, all you're thinking about is how great of an experience this is. But very quickly he follows up with, but when you come out, all you're really thinking about is this was the most science I've ever experienced before in my life. But that was just one experience for Romanieo. Do you remember the solar eclipse back in 2017? Well, it was significant because it was a total solar eclipse visible across all of North America, from East Coast to West Coast, at least as it pertains to North America. And Romanieo, well, he had an opportunity to travel to Chile for the 100th anniversary of the confirmation of Albert Einstein's famed general theory of relativity. And now, you're not sure what that means? Well, basically, they wanted to do the same exact experiment that Sir Eddington, one of Einstein's study, did more than 100 years ago. And in its most simplistic terms, it means they wanted to prove how space will curve with gravity around planets. Now, how do you do this? Well, father and son, they drove down to Chile and they set up their equipment that was 100 years more advanced than even Sir Eddington's back in the day. This means when you combine those experiences with the scientific discoveries and advanced technologies of today, I believe this translates into that multiplier X effect times that of Einstein's available knowledge and technologies. That's that R Golphin equals A Einstein square. Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, he wrote about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice being theoretical number of hours a person would have to apply to become world-class in any field. Now, these have been greatly contested and questioned and so forth, but these field trips were just part of Romaniao's 10,000 hours. Additional examples of his experiments included having been invited to CERN, the European Organization of Nuclear Research, being named ambassador to the Atlas experiment, visiting Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, a top-secret facility, having met over 7 different astronauts across just as many NASA sites. These were all experiences that Romanieo was able to absorb within his greater than 10,000 hours of experience. You see, we all have inherent abilities, if we exist at all, because it's not possible to exist without having experiences. The question is, how do you experience? Is it a conscious process? Do you know what you're good at? What are you naturally inclined to do? We all have tendencies that unconsciously prompt our actions, and even before we've even made the decision to perform those actions, they're prompted by our instincts. Artem Korin, author of Untethered, Unraveling Human Nature Through Instinct, Culture, and Reason, describes many of these inclinations as being instincts. He suggests that evolution has shaped us to act in a particular way, some of them primitive and some of them animalistic. And by accepting the animal aspects of our nature, our instincts and drive gain context and begin to make more sense. Think Different Nation takes this notion one step further. We believe that we are the end result, at this moment in time, of bacteria that emerged some 4 billion years ago, leading to the first species with a vertebrae that also possessed eyes, with very similar capabilities to our own, the lamprey, 360 million years ago, evolving into millions of different species on land, including the first humans to exist roughly 5.8 million years ago, down to our closest relatives, Homo neanderthalensis, some 1.8 million years ago, and ultimately to present day. You see, for each successive species, traits and inclinations that assisted in the continuation of those species, they adapted to align around the species' survival for continuation. Traits that did not support continuation, they either changed to be more supportive, they disappeared, as did the need, or they disappeared, as did the species, and thus change. So think about it. If we inherit our DNA from our parents, and them from their parents, and so on, then why would we not have received their inclinations, tendencies, and traits from those who went before them, especially if they had very specific abilities such as Romaneo's father and mother? Even scientists today believe that inclinations and tendencies could be embedded in what they call junk DNA. And that junk DNA, it makes up about 70% of a person's total DNA. So there's huge potential for this as an area of study. At Think Different Nation, we've identified 5 class groupings of instincts, including the physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and social, with inclinations or tendencies directly associated with each one. But now remember, in order for a tendency to be triggered, there has to be potentially one of more than 5 different senses through which those tendencies are triggered. For example, in order to experience fear, it has to be triggered by one of the following senses. By sight, you see something. By sound, you hear something. By touch, feeling it, tasting it, or smelling something, because those are the primary basic instincts that we all possess. But we've also heard of inclinations such as intuition and feeling things that we know are there, but that others cannot see in that separate realm. So, how many instincts remain in the humans? Well, psychologists suggest that we have more than 37 basic instincts, everything from fear to jealousy, that make us inclined to act, do, and think in certain ways. But here's the question. Are those inclinations assisting you in becoming your best self? In painting your masterpiece? Could you potentially gain from that knowledge? Would having the ability to better understand what instincts drive you both negatively and positively help to propel your life forward? At Think Different Nation, we're working to develop a way to capture those instincts and map them to our personal genome. And I'm looking to crowdsource the impact through a series of survey questions where I'm asking you to take and asking your friends to take them. My name is Ty Glover, and I'm an evolutionary macro-level theorist, and I'm working with Aram Gall, who's a genetic researcher and creative writer, and we're working to capture those tendencies and instincts which we all inherently have. If you want to learn more, go to our website at thinkdifferentnation.com and complete the available survey to help us to reach as many people as possible. Through a series of survey questions surrounding each tendency and while capturing your own additions, what may drive you additionally to those 37, our goal is to capture those answers and map those results with your genetic code and to find the commonalities that exist between your answers and the answers from all the other survey takers. If you're the kind of person who's always striving to be your personal best, your best self, then join the movement and learn more. Learn how to truly think differently.